Well, hello, can I just say a very warm welcome to you all, wherever you're joining us from today, on behalf of the Career Service to our Big Brave session. This is actually the closing session in the Law Fair Online, which has been spanning the last 3 days. And for those of you that don't know, what is the Big Brave? Well, the Big Brave is a chance to hear a career story. It's someone who's achieved success due to their bravery, to their passion, to their determination to make an impact in what they do. And I have to say, today's guest, I think, really embodies that. We also have the Q&A element, obviously, and that allows you to ask questions that are relevant to you right now and in the future. We will be running other Big Braves attached to our other fairs, so do have a look on Glasgow Careers to check out what they are. We have a number of speakers, including, I know we've got the head of aerodynamics for McLaren Racing, and we've got a researcher at the Crick Institute. So we've got some very diverse speakers coming up. So yeah, check out Glasgow Careers to find out more. But before we meet Jonathan and get chatting, I've got some housekeeping to go through with you, some practicalities. So first of all, today's session is being filmed. All the attendee audio and video is inactive. A link for the webinar will be sent to all participants after the presentation, and a transcript of the webinar will be made available to all participants after the presentation. Please note that questions will be answered at the end of the presentation. So Jonathan will have a chance to speak first. I'll ask him some more general questions at the beginning, and then we'll come to the Q&A. But you will have an opportunity to submit your questions to today's presenter at any time during the webinar. You just need to go to the bottom of your screen, and if you do that, you'll see there's a Q&A function. So you input your questions to the Q&A function there, and then we'll come and we'll answer those later on in the session. And if Jonathan's okay with it, if we don't manage to get through all the questions, we will try and do that live today. But if we're not able to do that, then we can email, if you email us in your question, we can email to Jonathan and we'll get an answer from him. So let's get going. A very warm welcome to Jonathan Tait. Many thanks, Jonathan, for taking time out of your very busy schedule to come and speak to us today. I'll give you a little bio. Jonathan's got a really interesting bio, actually. He's had a very interesting career journey, so I'll start off with that. So today, Jonathan works as a solicitor for BTO, specialising in intellectual property protection and exploitation, and media and entertainment law, servicing a broad range of creative industry and commercial clients. He offers clients that rare advantage of combining both legal knowledge with hands-on experience across the creative industry. For many years, he worked in the music and entertainment industry alongside companies such as MTV, BBC, Scot FM, SONY-BMG and Total Rock. He's worked in artist management, tour management. He's been a radio presenter. He's owned his own rehearsal and recording studios and music consultancy business. He's also worked in music education, and it was this area of work that sparked his initial interest in IP and data protection, ultimately leading to him retraining in the law. He studied an LLB at Edinburgh Napier University, followed by the Diploma in Legal Practice at Edinburgh University, which he completed in 2012. He undertook his traineeship with Innova Law, which is a full-service law firm, before joining BTO in 2018. So, welcome, Jonathan. What an interesting career you've had and are having, and what an interesting CV. So, before we just get the ball rolling, I'll start by asking a few questions, but students, feel free at any point to start populating the Q&A for questions, which we'll come to in a bit. But maybe, Jonathan, you could just start by taking us back to the start of your career and giving us an idea of how you've got to where you are today.
Yes, well, if I can remember that far back. Well, I always knew at high school, which was, a few years ago now, that I wanted to work in music, but I didn't know in what shape or form. It was very apparent I wasn't going to be on the performance side of the music industry, despite early failed attempts. But yes, my strengths do not lie in my vocal or instrument ability. And so when I left high school in 1995, my original plan was to go into journalism and to specialise in music journalism. But there was only one course really running at that time that was offering what I was after, and unfortunately, I didn't get into that course. There was a very, very high demand, and so from there, I actually went to college in Edinburgh and undertook an HNC and HND in media and communications and radio broadcasting, and it was from there that my radio life and radio career began. And I was doing student radio, Edinburgh College Radio, Fresh Air FM, and then I got a job with Scot FM in Q96, which was a Glasgow-based station. So I was doing a lot of marketing for them. I was doing road shows and presenting jobs. And it was the road shows, I suppose, where my live career began in about 1997, because we were working with bands and artists that were doing live feeds. So I seemed to be quite adept at working with or communicating between the radio stations and the managers and the bands, you know, keeping the bands happy whilst you know, getting them to do their job. And I really enjoyed that, you know, working hands-on with the artists. And so from there, I had a series of jobs. I looked after a number of bands, and really decided in about the year 2000 that I wanted to make a real career out of this. And so I studied music industry management with Adam Armit down at Julian S. Valley College, which was quite a specialist course at the time, and set up a record label there and managed to get internships with Bruce Finlay from Schoolhouse Management, who looked after Simple Minds and Annie Christian and that type of roster. And from there, it really took off, and I looked after my own artists. I was my own, you know, I was a band manager. I was tour managing, and then I got into by accident. I got into owning a rehearsal room and recording studio in Edinburgh. And purely by accident, there was I couldn't stand working from home, which is ironic given that's all I do now. But I couldn't stand working from home, and so I managed to find a little space in Leith in Edinburgh, and it was an old joiner's office actually, but I changed it into a nice just office for me, and I had a big storage room at the back of it, which I stored all my band's touring gear in. And somehow they couldn't get rehearsal space one night, and so we mocked up a rehearsal studio, and they just didn't leave. And you know, so when they went on tour, I opened it up as a commercial rehearsal room, and as far as I'm aware, I think it's still running actually in Edinburgh, not by me, but I had that for about 10 years. And it was a really good way to meet bands and meet creatives. And it became a hangout place. You know, there was people that would come down and just, you know, without even a band, and come down for a coffee or maybe a beer, who knows. And it was a great place to meet different artists and, you know, sort of, you know, really become part of the industry. And from there,
a great networking opportunity.
Well, it was great. It was great, and there was a lot of really exciting bands coming through the studios and coming through Edinburgh at the time. You know, people like the Delgados were great, Psych Essential, Shrinking Violet, Playtone. You know, a lot of the indie kids that went on to, you know, form other more successful bands. But it was a good time, and so from there, I set up the consultancy business because I was asked to manage lots of different bands, and at that time, but I couldn't really dedicate the time. You know, very hands-on in management. So I set up the consultancy business and helped, you know, where I could on with different bands, and you know, kept on doing the studios, kept on doing different tours and working with different bands and artists, and picked up gigs here, picked up gigs there. You know. Toured with the likes of Ocean Colour Scene, you know, done some gigs with Travis, The Darkness, that, you know, these types of bands, you know, one-off sometimes, but anything to pay the bills. And throughout that, whilst representing and managing the bands, I was exposed to a lot of lawyers, very big lawyers, very, very, very expensive lawyers. And there was one in particular who advised us to, one of the bands that I was looking after, to enter into a contract. And I didn't feel it was a particularly good contract, but what did I know? You know, I was just this young upstart who, you know, was fighting for his band, but this you know, head of legal department in a big London firm had been doing it for years, and he had a huge, very, very impressive client list. So we bowed to his experience, and it took me 2 years getting books out of libraries and understanding what was wrong with the contract to get my band out of the contract. And I think that's probably the spark of, you know, I thought, oh, I could do this. This is not as hard as it seems. I was very, very, very wrong in that assumption, but I think that's possibly where the spark of from the legal aspect came from, and that was probably back in 2005. And I then got asked to go on and do some lecturing at Julian S. Valley College on tour management and A&R. You know, in between times, I'd worked in A&R for Total Rock and for SONY-BMG, picking up artists and recommending them to some of those particular labels, and some shopping around for some other labels. And it was then I got approached to do the lecturing at Julian S. Valley College. So I did that for a year or so. That was great fun. Some brilliant students there that have gone on to do really, really good things that I'm still in contact with. So I'm really proud to have been a part of that. And from there, again, that was a late night conversation where the head of the music department said, why don't you come in and do this? I've never done lecturing before. Nobody's going to want to listen to me. I'll come in and give it a go. And, you know, a year later, I was then approached by the Academy of Music and Sound, who were opening up their first Scottish college. And it was a dedicated music college in Edinburgh. And they asked me to run it. And again, I had that moment of, you know, that inferiority moment, going, I've never run a college. What the hell do I know about the education sector? But you take the plunge, and, you know, I ran that for about 3 years, and then I took on the Glasgow and the Newcastle College, and then subsequently ended up the vice principal of the whole group. And we had at one point 11 colleges up and down the United Kingdom that I was overseeing. And whilst doing that, because running 11 colleges up and down the country, and still being a consultant and getting married and having my first child, I thought, well, that's not enough. What can I do? You know, there's 2 hours of one night that I've got a lot of time. So I decided to go to Napier University at night and study law. Again, a lot of my dealings with the academy group was dealing with contracts, commercial contracts, but there was a lot of intellectual property contracts as well. And I had a very rudimentary understanding initially of it. And so it was my thought process that I will study this at night while I was building up all the colleges. And I didn't at that point actually have an intention, I don't think, of going into law full time. You know, the academies were doing really well. I had some artists that I was looking after that were doing well, and as such, this was just something else to have in the background, so that I could do more with the academy group. But then about, I think it was 2016, there was a change in how we operated. There was a change in the landscape of higher and further education. And my wife and I had another child, and I was traveling away a lot. You know, out of 11 colleges, only 2 were in Scotland, so I was never home, and that's not really where I wanted to be in my late 30s. And so, again, a chance conversation with somebody at a dinner party over Christmas, I think it was, led to me approaching a law firm, or them approaching a law firm on my behalf to see if I could do any business development for them. So I thought I could use my business development expertise and experience and cross over into the legal field, so I could use a bit of my legal training. And they just turned around and went, yeah, that's great, but why don't you just take up a traineeship? And so that was exceptionally frightening, because I was 38. I was quite successful, in terms of my career standing, in terms of my career development, but in terms of my salary as well. And then to take on a traineeship was very, very daunting. But fortunately, I have a great support network around me. And so I took the plunge. I stopped the consultancy. I gave up the job and the position and everything that went with it, with the academy group, and I became a trainee. And I'd done 2 years traineeship, which was possibly the hardest 2 years of my entire life, because, again, well, naively at the beginning of it, I actually kept the consultancy on because I thought, I can do this. And being a trainee is quite full on. So I quickly knocked the consultancy on the head and concentrated on that, and spent a great 2 years with Inova Law in Edinburgh, who are a commercial firm, and they didn't really do any IP when I'd started, but I'd started doing IP trademark registrations and so forth for clients towards the end. So we were able to diversify the offering for the law firm. And at the end of the traineeship, again, because I was then 40 years of age, and really, it was not a particularly good time for traineeships. A lot of the firms had gone through financial shake-ups and were not really taking on trainees. And whilst I had a wealth of experience, I didn't have a wealth of legal experience. I hadn't done any internships. I hadn't done any sort of legal summer placements, because I had children, I had other business commitments as well. And so I hadn't really thought that I was going to get a job in law. And as it happens, I replied to an advert, and I think it was Scottish Legal News, who were looking for a data protection solicitor, and with a little bit of IP. And I thought, well, data protection, this was just, just pre-GDPR. So there was lots of work, and I thought that's quite interesting. And there's scope for development into the IP sector. So I went along for an interview. I went along for an interview with another firm. So I pitched myself to another firm who were specialising in IP, and I got offered both jobs. And one was in Edinburgh and one wasn't. So, logistically, one worked really well for me. And so I took the plunge, and I started with BTO in 2018, and about 3 months into my job, the lady that hired me was headhunted, and she took leave and left me without really a mentor and a position. And I was a little bit panicky by that point, because I'd taken myself out of the music sort of industry for about 2 years whilst doing the traineeship, which is a long time to let a sector go. I never really kept up a lot of the sort of contacts, which was remiss of me. But, as I said, the traineeship was relatively full on. And so I was then at the stage going, oh dear, what do I do now? And my now boss came to me and called me into a boardroom with other head partners who I'd never even met. And they were all sitting around this big, huge board table in this big fancy room. And I just said, well, I just empty my drawer then. And they said, no, but we think we have an opportunity here. Why don't we set up a creative services department, a dedicated creative services department with you, sort of, really pushing it with your industry background. And that's how BTO Be Creative was born nearly 2 years ago. And it's been going great since, because there's quite a few people in Scotland who touch upon IP and media and entertainment, but there's no dedicated team. So, they do a bit of media, they do a bit of this, they do a bit of that, but that's primarily what we do. And so we have people like myself who have worked in the industry, who can take the music industry element to the legal element. And we have practitioners, very, very high practitioners, solicitor advocates, and, experts in the field who do a lot of the litigation work. So we're a full service, but very small team. And so that's been the last, that's been the career journey in a nutshell, I suppose.
Oh, that's so interesting. Thanks for sharing that. I think, you know, it is, I think we talk about a career journey, and you can see how you've come to where you are today. And you can see, you know, I think there's maybe a couple of things that jumped out for me there. Networking was a big part of,
yes.
of you moving on to the next stage, mm-hmm. and, you know, being around people and speaking to people and taking those opportunities. But also risk taking. You know, I think it sounds like you've had to take some risks, and that's very interesting. We'll move over to students. So students, please do populate the Q&A, because there's so much there that Jonathan can help you with. So whether you want to ask legal questions, or whether you want to ask about music, or any of the areas he's touched about, please do answer ask some questions. But I just wanted to quickly ask, before we move on to the student questions, you know, for somebody who is out there who is thinking about a career change, possibly, do you have any advice for them? You know, who want to, as you've done, move into something different to where they're at the moment?
I think my one piece of advice, or my one mantra, is go for it. I think if the last months have taught us anything, it's what's important in life. And, you know, life is too short to continually do stuff that you're not happy with, or not content with, or not feeling that you are providing a valuable contribution to. And therefore, every time whilst I've changed quite a bit, it's always been within the same sort of linear line. You know, it's always been surrounding music in some way, shape, or form.
Yes, that's been the constant theme.
Yeah, I knew that's my passion, that's my love. And, you know, as I say, I don't play anything, so I don't have that outlet. But the fact that I'm surrounded with the industry and involved so deeply in the industry is my outlet. And so any advice that I could give on that is go for it, but also do your research, have an understanding, and have a realistic understanding of what you're jumping into. There are lots of agencies, support networks, careers advisors, information out there. So make sure that what you're jumping into is attainable. And if it's not attainable, there must be a reason for that. And you can make it attainable if you do it properly. You know, if we look at the vice principal position, if we look at BTO Be Creative, these didn't exist until, you know, I made them exist, or certainly was a catalyst in making them exist. And so if there isn't an opportunity out there, because the music industry in Scotland is relatively small, you know, I was very, very clear in my head that I wanted to base myself here. You know, I've done all the work in London and you know, and up and down the country, and it's fine. But I like living here, and I like having a life here, and I have a network here. And so, so I had to create opportunities, but I had to be realistic about what opportunities I could create. You know, and it's all very well coming up with these, you know, and I come up with 100 ideas a day, but you know, I have to tell myself or pull myself in a little bit and be realistic about what is actually achievable in that sphere. So, you know, advice: go for it, but do your background, do your due diligence, for all the lawyers out there, and make sure that you know what you're getting into. And as I say, there's so many supporting agencies, especially in the creative sector up here in Scotland, that it is, you know, that there's always somebody there to offer advice or support. And you know, it's a very good community. So, you know, go for it.
Great, thanks for that. So we're starting to get some questions coming in now. The first one, hello, I'm currently studying Masters in Music Industries. I've always wanted to work in live music management, festivals, standalone venues or tours, but given the current circumstances with the state of the industry, what would you recommend to students like myself who want to break into this line of work? And we are aware, actually, for any line of work at the moment, things are tougher perhaps than they have been up to now. So yeah, it'd be great to get your advice there.
Yes, so for live music management, it's a terrible term. This is one of the most affected areas in the music industry because of the restrictions and because of the changing restrictions. So you know, I'm hearing daily horror stories about, you know, the live music sector and the nighttime economy not kickstarting starting until July, August 2021, which will eradicate a lot of skills and eradicate a lot of very viable businesses. But for those wanting to break into it, I suppose the advice would be is to look at alternative routes to live management. Now, there's a lot of events going online at the moment. There's a lot of virtual events happening, and so and the way that a lot of the industry is talking at the moment, that will be the norm for the foreseeable. And I think as well that it will be an ongoing option for artists and for festivals. So familiarise yourself with these types of platforms. However, we all want to get back into a field, and we all want to get back into a venue, and so there are really great support networks that can get you into the live sector. So expos like Expo North, Born to be Wide and Wide Days, Resonate in Glasgow, the Scottish Alternative Music Awards, all these types of events have internships, they have speakers, they have keynote talks and keynote addresses that you can speak to, the head of Live Nation, the head of Regular Music, CPL Music, Dance Factory, etc., and get direct sort of contact and advice from them. So I would actively encourage anybody that's looking to get into any sector in music, or whatever sector it may be, to go to these talking shops, to go to these platforms, and get the advice of the people there. That was how I got my job. My first job in music with Schoolhouse Management was by going along to one of these events and just talking to the guy afterwards and asking, can I do some unpaid work for you? And I worked there for, some would say I'm still working for Mr. Finlay, but yeah, that was my break. So go along, and if anybody wants particular contacts for the heads of these sort of organisations, I'm quite happy to provide that. But there's a lot of support networks out there.
Great. Sticking with the music theme, there's another question here asking, really touching on the job security side of things, and I know that you mentioned, we all our values change, I guess, through our lives depending on our circumstances, etc. So, you talked about how you took on, started a family, maybe wanted a bit more job security. So students asking here, are there roles that would offer more job security within the music industry, or is it mainly freelance work? Well, it is mainly freelance work, but do you see the job security side of it at all in the music industry?
Yes and no. I mean, there are some great stalwart companies that you can get job security in, but you're talking about a commodity that has taste changes in it, and so you've got an industry that has to adapt to changing taste. So when I worked in A&R, it was I was tasked with a particular brand or genre of music to go out and get, and then public opinion changed on that music, so there was no requirement for me to bring that to the record labels anymore. And the new taste in music, I wasn't particularly influenced by or experienced in, so I was too old for that job at 23. So the majority is freelance work, unless you can, a number of my clients and contacts and friends within the industry, they have to take on multiple roles in order to offer any kind of ongoing security. So some will, for those that are performers, they will have their performance side, they will have a covers band, they will teach, they will write music, they will review music, so it's all these little elements that will make up their sort of their salary, if you like. If you're looking for a 9-to-5, well, it's not really the industry to do that, but there's very few record or music industry jobs in Scotland. that are not partially freelance. There are some organisations like Creative Scotland that have great websites, or the Scottish Music Centre that can that post these types of jobs on, but the majority of any industry-based jobs are down south, Manchester and London. So, and arguably they offer a little bit more security because they're full employment-based jobs. So you've got your your employment rights on the back of that. But if you're planning on staying up here, then certainly at the moment, it's about probably 90% freelance, 10% salaried, unfortunately, unless you go into something like running your own events, setting up your own company that way, or going into law, or one of the management jobs as well. But it's mainly freelance, I would say, at the moment.
Okay. Somebody picking up on what you said earlier, working in broadcasting. So you had a spell working there. What skills did you learn from BBC Radio Scotland broadcasting, would you say? What were the skills that came out of that?
I didn't broadcast on Radio Scotland. It was local radio, but I have done work with Radio Scotland. But in terms of the skills that I picked up from broadcasting, there were great skills and transferable skills. So it was communication, it was resilience as well, because there was always somebody else trying to get the job, because radio was still a very big medium back in the sort of late 90s and early 2000s. It's still got its place, but I think certainly with the advent of digital radio and all the alternatives, but there was 6 main stations back then, so you coveted your jobs there. Tenacity was another skill I learned, but the other skill that has been really honed into me and was probably really came to fore with the broadcasting side was attention to detail. We used to have to work to very tight deadlines, and we had very specific remits that we had to work to. If I had to go out and find a piece of music or for a show, I had a very tight remit, and you had to do that within a very tight turnaround time. So it was working to deadlines. It was working autonomously as well. That was my first probably job where you were told to go out and just do it. Here are the instructions. Here are the parameters. Go and do it and be back in this time. And there's no second chance. So it was really, you had to be on the ball, which was great because it taught those skills transferred into me, with my consultancy, because you get one job wrong, you don't get the job again. And going into the legal world, you get that wrong, well, there's a lot of problems that kick up on the back of that, as you can imagine.
Great. Okay. We've still keep the questions coming, guys. We've still got a couple here, but I'm just interested in, you've had such an interesting career. I'm just wondering, what do you think it is about you that's enabled you to get the opportunities that you have, because you're in a niche area. What do you think you have that people have been attracted to, that have said, yeah, take this opportunity, here's an opportunity?
I think the ability to do what you say you're going to do. There's a lot of people that are a lot of yes people. Yeah, I can do that, no problem. But it's following through and doing a good job at the back end of that. And I would like to class myself as a reliable individual. I've got quite a good, I had a very supportive upbringing, and I've got a very supportive family. So that's taught me that, you do a good job. If you're asked to do something, you take it on something, you see it through. And I think that's something that works really well in the legal world, but also in the creative world. There's lots of people, as I say, that will take on lots of different roles because they've got bills to pay. But the end result is never, sometimes not always what it should be. So if you are taking on something, see it through and do it to the best of your ability. And I think I'd like to think of myself as a relatively open, honest, and social person. I'm always, available for a discussion on anything. People excite me. ideas excite me, creativity excites me, and opportunities excite me. And you never know what opportunity could lead to another opportunity. We do work in, or I straddle music and I straddle law, two of which are quite elitist and snobbish industries. There's a lot of people with very, very strong opinions in both of these sectors. And I think the fact that whilst I have very strong opinions, I like to think that I'm as open-minded as I can be to embrace other people's ideas, opinions, and creativity. And yeah, see the job through, do it well, and keep an open mind. And I think that's what's allowed me to jump between so many different projects, and different facets of my career.
And can I ask who's inspired you during your life? Who have you looked to and been inspired by as you've had your journey? Well,
a number of people. My grandmother was one of the first ones. I mean, she was not an educated woman. She came from the Outer Hebrides, but she was a fiery woman, and she was a seamstress. That was her trade, and she delved into the rock and roll world. She made clothes for Bowie, for the Bay City Rollers. Brian yeah, well, yeah, it was her that did all the tartan stuff. But she was a warden for the homeless in Edinburgh, and she ran her own shops up until in her 80s, and she was a fierce woman. So she was a real hero to me, and my mother also. But when I got into the industry, one of my mentor to this day, and my hero in music, local music, was Bruce Finlay, who I mentioned earlier. And when I started at college in 2000 to do the music management course, one of the attractive things about that course was the fact that it was all industry practitioners who were taking it. So we had Bruce Finlay for management, we had Stuart Nesbitt for touring, so he was tour manager for China Crisis and played in the Proclaimers. We had Ronnie Gurr for A&R, who signed Stereophonics and Kula Shaker and that kind of people. So it's very practical people that were working within the industry. But Bruce and I really bonded, and he's become a very, very close friend of mine. And I still look up to him, and I still go to him for advice. He's a retired man now, but I still go to him for advice when I want to talk to you. So he's been an inspiration to me, because he was somebody that was very he was somebody that embraced opportunities as well, setting up a chain of record stores in the 1950s and 60s because somebody told him he couldn't do it. That kind of attitude. And, signing Simple Minds and taking them on to be the biggest band in the world because somebody told them that the band were crap. That type of fiery attitude. So he's really guided me. And so my granny, my mum, and Bruce, I suppose, are my three. And latterly, I'm inspired on a daily basis by the madness that my children bring into my life, and the fact that they don't care that I've got, a settlement due, or clients crying at the end of the phone, or people that are, they want to tell me about the stones that they've picked up and the mud that they've eaten. So they inspire me now. So it's going round about ways, but yeah.
Keep you down to earth.
Yeah, but I think it's important to have these people to look up to and to aspire to. And if you're lucky enough to work in the industry that these people are, and to befriend them, and take their advice, it makes a difference. It really does, and it's made a substantial difference to my career having these people on board.
Well, I know in Careers we encourage students to take advantage of our mentoring program. So we have the network, which is our student alumni service. A lot of alumni are offering to be mentors to students, and I know how important that kind of relationship is with people as they go through life. To have a mentor like that, and you can really see in your life how important that's been.
Yes, very much so. I mean, I as I mentioned earlier, I'm one of the mentors for Napier University, their creative department in Edinburgh, and it's wonderful to give something back. But I mean, I still go to Bruce for advice. One of my other heroes in music was Mark Mackey from Regular Music. And Mark gave me my first office, you know, in York Place when I was with the Academy, setting out on my own. And you know, he runs everything from the Hydro to Edinburgh Castle, and you know, to the Liquid Rooms and Sleazy. So you know, what he doesn't know about live music, nobody knows. And but he's a close friend now. And again, you know, although we work in different worlds. You know, in terms of my legal world and his live music world, you know, there is a crossover, and I can go to him. And I think one of my proudest moments as a lawyer was being instructed formally by Mark. You know, so this was a friend, somebody I'd grown up and somebody had been a mentor that then came to me for help. And so I was able to help him and support him in a way that he couldn't do it himself. And so that was a real tick moment for me. So, but yeah, I still go to these people daily, and there are others as well. You know, Keith Harris is another hero of mine. So he's Stevie Wonder's manager, and we've become friendly over the last couple of years. But he's been, you know, he's a wise man, and I always, you know, if I'm ever feeling kind of overwhelmed, it's nice to have a quick chat with him, because he just makes everything clear, you know.
Great. So I'm kind of aware that we haven't got that much longer left, and we wanted to touch on the legal side too. This is part of the Lawfare Online. A student has asked, how easy was the transfer into a legal career, and you know, how was the path easy to identify and find? You know, it's interesting. It's great to speak to somebody actually that's come from the music industry and come from such a different area, but has managed to combine that passion with the law. Yeah. But you know, I haven't met many people who have done that. But I guess it's maybe the area you're in, the IP, the music and entertainment side of law, or media and entertainment side of law. Maybe you could touch on that a bit. Yeah,
well, to answer the question, honestly, it wasn't particularly easy in the first instance to transfer. I mean, I had an interview with a law firm when I was still doing my study, my LLB. And so in fourth year, you start looking for traineeships, because they're always done sort of 2 years in advance. And I went to a firm who had a creative department, an IP department, they had music. And effectively I got told by, and I subsequently worked with this firm, and we laugh about it now, but I was told by their HR person that I was a bit too old and I earned a bit too much money to really come in as a trainee. And I pointed out the irony of discrimination in a legal interview. That didn't go down well. However, it wasn't easy, and it was by identifying an opportunity that I was able to do it. Now, in saying that, a lot of my peers who have gone the more traditional route, i.e. school, university, traineeship, have found it a little bit easier. And what I would say on that is, if you are looking to go directly into a career in law, is to look at your external opportunities and really embrace them. And by that, I mean, look at your local citizens advice, look at your summer placements, look at your internships. There's a lot of work placements for firms out there. And, you know, I get approached quite a lot, and so does my firm and my department, for work experience. And some of it's unpaid, some of it's, you know, an internship. But look at getting in front of as many different law firms as possible. Go to law fairs, speak to them. When your CV lands on my desk, or, you know, one of the partners' desks, they will be looking at, yes, your qualifications, yes, your studies, but also what you've done yourself to further your career in whatever sector it is. There is a high demand for legal placements and legal traineeships, and, you know, those that are qualifying in law, you know, are far greater in number than the traineeships that are available currently. That's just the way that the industry is working at the moment. But there are there are opportunities, but I would say, you know, really clearly to all the students that are interested in law, look at building up your CV, look at going into different areas, go to your local citizens advice, go to your legal free advice centre. Glasgow University, Edinburgh University have free legal advice centres that run over during the trimesters. You know, volunteer for them. The more experience that you've got, the more you look like a serious candidate when your application goes in or when your CV lands on a partner's desk. And I didn't find it particularly easy initially, and some of the discussions were about what I hadn't done, not what I had done. And fortunately, the firm that took me on were a commercial firm, so they were able to understand and see my commercial ability because of my background and my experience, and that only came with age. So I don't think they would have taken me on had I been a fresh graduate, because I wouldn't have had that experience, and I also wouldn't have had anything in my CV that would have given me that extra edge. So if you're coming straight from university, you don't have, you're not a mature student like I was, then try and get as much extracurricular work on your CV and under your belt as possible. Law firms recognise that, but also law firms remember you for when you're in doing these placements as well. And I know a number of students that have come on as placements that have got the traineeship and have got a job with that firm. So it does work, the process does work.
That's great advice. Well, we're really unfortunately coming to the end, Jonathan. I just wanted to ask one last question. What for you now, what are your priorities? What do you see going forward in terms of your career? What would be your thought now in going forward, do you think?
Well, the last couple of months have seen a radical change in what is being asked of me as a solicitor, as me as a consultant, as me as an individual, as me as a friend. And so for BTO Be Creative, what I think we will still be servicing the creative industries, but we will be helping to resurrect an industry and to support that, rather than looking at the diversification of people's offering. We will be looking at keeping them in work and supporting their kickstart projects. That's what we're doing a lot of at the moment. We're working a lot with the support agencies as well. So I think there will be a radical change in the work that we provide and the services that we provide to our clients going forward. You know, on some of the side projects that I work on, these have come out of frustration over lockdown, and these have come out of people's creativity coming to the fore under these circumstances. What will change for me is, personally, is a life-work balance. I've spent 30 odd years really, working. I had a job from when I was 12 years old, so I've worked constantly. But 20 odd years in the music industry, and I've worked every day and every night. And for me, what this has taught me is that there are other priorities. So that's not really helpful to start your career. But I think that going forward, the music industry and the legal industry is going to be under a radical overhaul on what it provides for its clients, for its users. And as such, I think if I can impart any final words of wisdom for anybody that's listening, is be adaptable and be aware of these changes, and don't be surprised if what you have been, or what your understanding of the industry and the marketplaces at the moment changes drastically, because that seems to be the way that it's going. And I don't know, I can't see that not being the case from the feedback that I'm getting from both sectors at the moment.
Mm-hmm. That's really useful to hear. Thank you so much. I would like to say thanks so much to Jonathan for his time today. It's been really interesting, really useful, and I think the students will have really benefited from what you've said. If we haven't managed to answer your question, please do email it to careers@glasgow.ac.uk and we will pass that on to Jonathan.
Yeah.
Don't forget to check out Glasgow Careers for the details of the other Big Brave events that we have coming up over the coming weeks. And thanks again, Jonathan, just to finish off, thanks again for taking time out of your really busy schedule to spend some time with us today.
Not a problem, and hopefully it's been of some use, but please, you know, as Shirley says, email in any queries. If you've not come up with a query just now and you think of something after, I'm always on hand. I might not be able to answer right away, but I will come back to you. And if there's any further advice I can give you in music and law, please use it as a resource.
Thank you.